Good Wednesday afternoon. It is August 28th, 2019, and we have a big update for you today. An increase in intensity has pushed Dorian to hurricane status, a Category 1 hurricane as of the 2 o'clock advisory from the National Hurricane Center. Here's a look at satellite imagery of the Atlantic Basin. We have two systems out there right now. Tropical depression Aaron spinning hundreds of miles off the eastern seaboard. Barely moving, but it will start getting off to the north there. But then we have tropical storm, or now, Hurricane Dorian, that moved just to the east of Puerto Rico. Its center did, sparing the island the worst of the effects. Still have some heavy rain on the way there, but the strongest of the winds have really been isolated and centered on the U.S. and British Virgin Islands over the past couple of hours. Here's the data, or the stats on the system right now. Winds up to 75 miles per hour. You need 74 mile per hour winds or greater to be considered a Category 1 storm, with those gusts up to 90 miles per hour. This upgrade is right from some missions that were conducted by the Hurricane Hunter aircraft that just picked up some winds of over 80 miles per hour. So that's why they upgraded the system there. It's moving at the northwest at around 13 miles per hour. Here's a closer look of some of the wind observations down through the U.S. Virgin Islands. Some wind gusts up and over tropical storm force in the last couple of hours here. On top of that, I put the radar. And in the last frame, you can see the center of Dorian here moving off just to the west of St. Thomas here. That clocked some wind speeds up and over 45 to even 50 miles per hour as it did so on that eastern side of that center. If you go over to Puerto Rico, some of the wind gusts here, not as strong, thankfully, up to around 25, 30 miles per hour, a little bit stronger the farther east you go and closer to that center that you can see there. But overall, it's just going to be a rain event for Puerto Rico, which in and of itself isn't great news because all that tree loss from Hurricane Maria 2 years ago could cause some mudslides in that general area. We're picking up the San Juan, Puerto Rico radar here. That is the same radar site that was completely obliterated by Maria as it moved on through there. Of course, it's up and operational now and picking up on the system here with plenty of tropical downpours and lots of rain to the U.S. and British Virgin Islands there as it moves off towards the north and the west. Here's a look at the forecast models in terms of rainfall for the next 24 hours or so. Again, not a ton of rain, but especially the southward facing slopes here, anywhere from 2 to 6 inches of rainfall is possible within the next day or so as it lifts away and away from the islands there. Overall, the cloud deck, the size of Dorian, has been expanding up to around nearly 400 miles in diameter. And we expect it, as it gains latitude, to kind of spread out a little bit more. Its wind field, however, is still quite small. Tropical storm force winds are only extending out less than 50 miles from the center there, and that should expand too as it moves out and strengthens a little bit further. Overall, it has been kind of evading all of the hostilities in the environment for the past several days in its lifetime so far. All that's ahead of this system is much more ideal environmental conditions as it gets into the southwest Atlantic and into the Bahamas. All the dry air that's been encircling the system will actually be replaced with more moist mid-levels, which will actually help aid in the strengthening of Dorian in the coming days. Ideal environment ahead, as I said. We have pretty much every category checked off here. Low wind shear, down to 5 to 10 knots, very, very low. That allows the thunderstorm structure to develop and grow vertically. Very warm sea surface temperatures. You need 80-degree waters or warmer. We have that, certainly. 84 to 86 on its projected path off to the north and west. High ocean heat content. I'm going to get into that a little bit more when I show you the map. And also the mid-level moisture. We're going to have less dry air around in the coming days. First, we'll start off with that lowering wind shear. As it moves on off towards the north and west in the coming days, it's going to encounter very low amounts of that all the way through the southwestern Atlantic and in north of the Bahamas as it continues on its strengthening trend in those coming days. Sea surface temperatures, too, you can see here, that's not a problem at all. In fact, there's not even any cooler waters anywhere near this projected track, 84 to 86-degree water temperatures. Now, that's just the skin of the ocean, what you find about 10 meters down, the 84 to 86. You need that warm water to extend down to a depth, and that's the ocean heat content here. The deeper that heat, the more energy that's available, and when storms move over the ocean, they cause it to be stirred up, upwelling, and when that happens, it tends to pull up cooler waters from the depths and replace the warm water at the surface, and eventually kind of quiets down the storm and weakens it. When you have that warm water extending down to a depth and upwelling occurs, you're just replacing warm water with warm water, and that's what we have on that projected path there. The satellite imagery showing that moist mid-level atmosphere here as it moves into the area north of the Bahamas and the southwestern Atlantic. Certainly not as many shades of yellow and rust color that we saw pretty much out in the middle parts of the Atlantic when it first developed. A much more moist atmosphere ahead. This also helps to favor something called rapid intensification. I'm sure we will see this in the coming days as it heads into those warm waters and the better conditions for it to develop. According to the National Hurricane Center, the definition of rapid intensification is an increase in the maximum sustained winds of at least 30 knots or 34 miles per hour in under a day. We've seen this happen numerous times. In fact, almost every single storm back in 2017 did that at some point in its lifespan. Here's how it looks on visible satellite imagery. You look at this, it certainly looks like a hurricane. It is feathering of the cirrus clouds along it. That's the outflow. Very healthy for it to breathe. Inflow coming in out of the south here, not pulling in as much dry air. We're not seeing the dry air intrusion like we saw yesterday. And it is starting to kind of warm and dry out a center and eye, especially after it moves away from the Virgin Islands there, any land interaction, and it's over the open waters of the southwestern Atlantic. We'll probably see that eye warm and clear on out. Watches and warnings out there. There's not a ton right now, but for Puerto Rico, a tropical storm warning is up for the island. The surrounding waters in the U.S. British Virgin Islands are under a hurricane warning here, but as this lifts away, these will likely be discontinued later on tonight. A broader look at the Bahamas and most of the rest of the Caribbean. No other watches or warnings out there just yet. That won't last. Hurricane Hunter aircraft has pretty much been in this system at some capacity, multiple aircraft at times, for the last several days. In the most recent mission, which prompted the upgrade to a Category 1 hurricane, found winds of 81 miles per hour and a surface pressure around 1,000. They extrapolated that and got around a pressure of 997, which gives us an indication that it is actually strengthening, even though it's interacting with some of the islands there. So here is the official track from the National Hurricane Center. The track gets updated at 11 a.m. and then will be again at 5 p.m. this evening. So this is the in-between, but it does forecast our first major hurricane of the 2019 season as it moves more northwest and then takes more of a westerly trajectory towards the east coast of Florida. If, in fact, it is a major hurricane at this point in time and makes landfall on the east coast of Florida, it'll be the first time a Category 2 or greater hurricane has made landfall on the east coast of Florida since Gene in 2004. So it's been 15 years, and this could be in the record books if that does occur. A lot of folks have been asking why it takes that left-hand turn and heads towards the east coast of the United States. It has to do with the overall steering going on in the atmosphere. And we're watching a ridge that will be developing off to the north of the system. Yet to be determined how strong this ridge is. But there are two possibilities here. It can either be a weaker ridge, which would open up a possibility for it to take a turn more northerly and escape and possibly put in jeopardy more of the mid-Atlantic and southeastern parts of the United States. If the ridge is just a little bit stronger, a little more broad, this will push it farther off to the west into that east coast of Florida like a lot of the models were indicating, and potentially surviving and heading back over in open waters of the Gulf of Mexico and making a secondary landfall somewhere along the Gulf Coast. Both are possibilities, and both are indicated by some of the models. I want to show you one issue that we've been having with some of the computer models so far. This was really plaguing the models early yesterday before they got a better handle on where the center of Dorian was actually located. Here's a lot of our hurricane models. Notice they all start the initialization where they think the center of Dorian is, not actually where it is. Most of these are off to the south and west, so that initialization error throws off the whole model. Only a few of these are actually picking up on exactly where Dorian is at the time these models were run. As these go out further in time, they start to diverge a little bit. The farther we get out into the future, they start to disagree a little bit more. That's why our cone of uncertainty grows in size the farther out you go into the future to account for this uncertainty. Some take it off to the north, that weaker ridge we just talked about. Some take it into Florida and eventually into the Gulf of Mexico. That stronger ridge, that's also a possibility. So all the areas in the yellow here, Gulf Coast states, southeastern parts of the United States, should also keep a monitor on this forecast because those models could be right. Some of them could verify. So this cone is only going to grow a little bit more as it goes farther out into time here. And this should definitely be monitored. Here's how the two global models are seeing things, the European and the GFS. The red lines, I know this is going to be hard to kind of concentrate on. Any red line is the European. and the yellow line is the GFS. There has been remarkable consistency in the location of the center of Dorian from these two models. It's just what varies is the intensity. That's always the tough part with tropical systems here. Moves off to the north of Puerto Rico, heads into the warm waters, ideal environment here. They start to show strengthening. Notice when the lines are really close together, that indicates a stronger, deeper system. The European well on board with that. As we go farther out into time, Friday evening at 9 p.m., Labor Day weekend getting underway. We're still hundreds of miles off the coast of Florida here north of the Bahamas. Both models show a strong system heading towards the coast of Florida. The differences start here. By Sunday around the lunch hour, the GFS starts to slow the system down and kind of meander it along the coastline a little bit farther to the north here. Meanwhile, the European makes it having landfall as a major hurricane in the southern parts of Florida and then possibly even emerging back out into the Gulf of Mexico. So there's a lot still up in the air here. Nothing is written in stone. Something that you should do, keep checking back on this YouTube page. We have videos coming out pretty much every couple of hours with any updates. If you have any questions in between, you can always find me on social media, meteorologist Tim Pandajis, and on Twitter at 13 Tim Pandajis.